everybody, good morning. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Leah and today I'm going to be talking about one of the most terrifying experiences that you can go through if you have hypoglycemia, and that is the 72-hour fast. Today I am being joined by my dog here in the corner. This is Drake. He also happens to be my best friend. And yes, I am a proud dog mom. It's raining where I'm at today, so I thought I would just cozy up with a cup of coffee and make this very important video that I've been wanting to make for a while. To be honest, I've been wanting to make this video for the last couple of weeks, but I just haven't been in the headspace to film it. I know it's kind of cliche and cheesy to say that this is like one of those really traumatic things in my life and I don't really want to talk about it and so on and so forth, because I do share so much, but this has actually been kind of hard for me to talk about. And today, a couple of things happened that made me decide to want to make this video. One thing is that I finally got down in writing from my endocrinologist that I have met all of the biological markers for an insulinoma. I also have my PET scan, my DOTA PET scan ordered. And so I will be going in for that here pretty shortly. Things are just moving along for me for this process. So getting that information today, and then I put on this hoodie. This is actually, I know you can't see because of the overalls, but this is actually a Stanford hoodie. And my treatment is done at Stanford in San Francisco, and that is where I had my 72-hour fast. So I just felt like today, all things kind of came around full circle. So I was gonna talk to you about that fast. First and foremost, this test is used for people that have hypoglycemia, especially fasting hypoglycemia, which is when, you can go 4 to 6 hours without eating and experience a low blood sugar under, say, 60. This is the kind of test that they do for that, and the reason for this test is they are ruling out something called an insulinoma. Now, an insulinoma is a small tumor that either hangs out in or around your pancreas, and it produces extra insulin. And that extra insulin is what causes you to have these blood sugar dips over time. So they want to use this test to make sure that that's not what you have and they can move on to something else. So in order to do this, you are going to be hospitalized, because when you're having low blood sugars, not eating for a couple of days, you're going to get very, very low with your blood sugar, more than likely. At least if you have an insulinoma, you will get very low in your blood sugars. And they just want to make sure that you're safe and that there's someone there to monitor you if you were to have some kind of problem, a seizure or anything like that. They want to make sure that the doctors are there to monitor you. So the 72-hour fast is, on paper, very easy. In practice, very difficult. So on paper, all they really want to do is they want to get your blood glucose down to a certain number, and then they draw labs, and from those labs they will be able to tell if you biochemically have the marker for an insulinoma or not. Easy, right? But getting to that point is a little bit more difficult. Okay, so to start, when you arrive at the hospital, first thing is first, they'll get you an IV placement. They'll get you set up in your room. You'll get some water, some ice chips. I had saline continuously running just to make sure I didn't get dehydrated. And they will usually take a basic CBC or metabolic panel just to kind of, check your overall health. I also had a hypoglycemia panel taken, and after this is when you begin monitoring your glucose. They will be coming in and checking your glucose every 4 hours from the start of your arrival until your glucose reaches under 70. So when you first get there, let's just say your glucose is 100, they take it 4 hours later, it's 90, take it 4 hours later, it's 69. Okay, well now instead of taking the glucose every 4 hours, they're going to begin taking your glucose every hour. During this time, you are not allowed to eat anything. The only thing that you will be allowed to drink is water. Some places will allow you to drink like sugar-free Sprite or things like that, but I really recommend that you just stick to the water just to make sure you're getting the best and most accurate results. You will also be allowed to walk around. You can do exercises if you think that will help to drop your glucose faster. But overall, you have 72 hours, which is 3 days, for your glucose to hit the target amount. Now, the target amount changes a little bit depending on what hospital that you're in, but I was at Stanford Hospital when I had mine, and my parameter was under 50. So they wanted my plasma glucose, which means from the vein, to be under 50 before they could take the five tests that make up the 72-hour fast, I guess you could say. So the 5 tests are, they will take your plasma glucose, your insulin, your C-peptide, proinsulin, and beta-hydroxybutyrate. And those 5 tests will be able to tell them if you have a pancreatic tumor called an insulinoma. If you do not have a low sugar during the 72 hours, or depending on how these tests come back, you should be able to rule out if you have an insulinoma or not. That is the basic function of this test. Okay, so like we said, once you get under 70, they start checking your blood sugar every hour. This is just done through a finger poke. They'll poke your finger, run it through a glucometer, and it'll tell them about where you're at. Once you reach under 50 by the glucometer's readings, they will then come in and draw blood. Now, at this point, they are wanting to make sure that your serum glucose, which it can be different from the glucose that you take from the blood from your finger, they can be 2 different readings. So they want to make sure that that serum glucose is under 50. So at this point, they will take a tube, they will run it, down to the lab, and if it is under 50, then they will come back and take all of the blood work that they need. So that's those 5 things that I mentioned: the plasma glucose, insulin, C-peptide, proinsulin, and beta-hydroxybutyrate. Once those have been run down to the lab will then again confirm that you were in fact under 50, and they'll send a message up. And if they say, yes, you were under 50, we got everything that we needed, then it gets pretty easy. They'll use the IV that they put in you to give you 1 milligram of glucagon. Now, the glucagon should rise your sugars at that point, and they want to see what your response to that glucagon is. So you will have 3 more blood work done. There's a lot of blood draws in the 72-hour fast. So they will give you the glucagon, and they will take 3 blood draws, one 10 minutes after, one 20 minutes after, and one 30 minutes after. So 3 last blood draws. After that last blood draw, it's pretty simple. You have to eat. They will continue monitoring you for probably at least a couple more hours. I was kept 1 extra night. They just wanted to monitor and make sure that those sugars are rising and staying where they need to stay. And in theory and on paper, that doesn't sound that bad, right? Like, yes, you're getting poked every hour. Yes, they're taking blood every couple of hours, but that's kind of the simplicity of how it's supposed to work. That is not how it went for me. So now I will share my experience. So when I arrived at my 72-hour fast at Stanford, I was supposed to have a room already kind of set up for me. They were going to call me when the room was clean and ready. I was going to go into the hospital that day and start my fast that way. However, personally, I had to come off of some beta blockers that I was taking for POTS syndrome. So I was told when I weaned off of them by my cardiologist that if at any time my heart rate was resting over 120, that I would need to go into the emergency room. So the night before I was scheduled to go in, I was having a very high heart rate. It was well over 120. It was making me feel very sick, and I was getting worried about it. So we actually went in through the emergency room. The emergency room monitored me until my room was ready, which was almost the next day. It was very late that night that we finally went up into my room. I was given a IV catheter in the emergency room. I was put on a cardiac monitor. I was given IV fluids, and they ran the basic blood panels, right? So they ran the CBC, the metabolic panel. I had a hypoglycemia panel ran, and then they also did some other things just to make sure that my heart was okay, but just lots of blood work, got an IV in, not a big deal. And then I was moved up to my room. So I decided to start the fast once I got to the hospital. My sugar was not very low at that point. So I decided, okay, as soon as I got to the emergency room, I stopped eating. I was only drinking water, and I was closely monitoring my sugar just to make sure that I didn't get too low before I actually got admitted into the hospital for my fast. So once I was admitted into the hospital, they asked me how long it had been since I had eaten. And at that point, I think it was about 8 hours or so. So they started counting, they counted that towards my fast as well. But that's when they started checking my glucose. So at that point, when I first got there, my glucose was over 80. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was over 80. So I was being monitored every 4 hours. And when I say monitored, I mean I was just got my finger poked, they ran that blood through the glucometer real quick, and as long as it was over 70, they would just come in every 4 hours. So that night, I was having a lot of anxiety. I hadn't really slept well the day before because of the heart palpitations and the tachycardia that I was going through. And I was really nervous about the fast. I was nervous about dropping my sugars low. And so I finally did fall asleep, but I was having very bad anxiety. At this point, it was just general anxiety, but it was anxiety. And I was able to fall asleep that night around midnight. The nurse came in to wake me up to take vitals because, of course, if you're in the hospital, they take vitals every 4 to 6 hours. So she came in to take vitals, and she woke me up, but she scared me. She woke me up. I was startled. My husband had already left for the night because they don't allow visitors to stay past 9. And I woke up not really knowing where I was. I don't know if you've ever done that before, where you woke up and you didn't know where you were or how you got there or what year it was, but that's kind of what happened to me. And so that anxiety piqued my heart rate. My heart rate started to climb, and my monitor started alarming. Once you get over 140 on your heart rate, the monitors will start to blare. And so that's what happened. The alarm started to blare. And I remember looking at the alarm and hearing the alarms going off, and I got really scared, even more scared, and my heart rate started beating even faster, and it got faster and faster, and my nurse started to panic a little bit. And I asked her, like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, I had like 5 nurses in my room, and I had a doctor, and they were wheeling in the crash cart just in case they needed it, and they were wheeling in an ECG, and they were placing 12 leads on me and running a ECG, and it was terrifying. I was so scared. My heart was beating so fast. At that point, the last time that I remember looking at the monitor, it was over 190, but I don't know exactly how fast it got. And the nurses kept asking me, they were like, are you feeling pain? Like, do you have chest pain? And I didn't have any pain, but it literally felt like there was a branding iron to my chest. I was so hot. I was sweating profusely. My chest was like burning uncontrollably. I felt like somebody had just stuck a branding iron right through me. And I'm telling the nurses this, and they're getting me ice packs and like packing my body with ice. And at this point, I don't think anyone really knew what was going on. I think they thought it was SVT, which is a dangerous condition, but it's not a condition that I have. And I just thought to myself that I was having a heart attack. I didn't think that I was dying. I just thought that I was having a heart attack. And I was thinking to myself, like, my husband is sleeping, at a friend's house right now, and he has no idea what's happening to me, and I have no way of telling him. Like, I can't call him right now and let him know what's going on to me. And that just terrified me. I felt so alone, even though there were, a lot of nurses and stuff in there, but nobody could give me answers. And then as soon as they did the EKG, I visibly saw a sigh of relief on everybody's faces. Like, they looked at the EKG and they were all kind of just like, okay, we can relax now. And so that made me calm down, and my heart rate kind of came down a little bit. And the doctor came in and explained to me that I had had a panic attack. which didn't surprise me because I've had panic attacks in the past. I just had never felt such a strange like heat sensation before. And he explained it to me like if you're running, your heart is beating faster, you get hot, you start sweating, your heart is working overtime. And that's what was happening there. But there were no abnormal rhythms, which is what they saw in the ECG. There was no sinus ventricular tachycardia. There was no SVT. There was nothing to be concerned about other than just a high heart rate. So luckily, after that happened, they decided that I needed a little bit of extra help calming down because I could just not calm down. So they gave me a nice little tranquilizer sedative, and I don't remember a whole lot past that. I know that they continued to come in every 4 hours and check my blood sugar, although I don't remember that happening. I know they just checked it while I was asleep because what they gave me was some good stuff, and I slept through the majority of my time after that. But back to the actual fast. So that happened to me. That was terrifying. I had said on Instagram like, oh, I'm gonna film all of this and I'm gonna take you guys all with me, but then after that I was asleep the whole time, so I couldn't really share anything with anyone. I didn't even like answer my friends' text messages really. I just wasn't really there to do it. So the panic attack happened, and then we got to, after that, my blood sugar started to go down a little bit, so they started checking it every 2 hours instead of every 4. So they did that 9 times. I had it checked every 2 hours, 9 times. Then they drew another panel of the CBC metabolic panel. They will do that every day that you're at the hospital. You'll get your just regular labs drawn. And then starting on the second day at night is when they started doing hourly blood checks. So I had reached under 70 at that point. So I was getting hourly blood checks, and I had that done for 17 hours. So 17 times every hour on the hour I had my blood sugar checked, and I'm really glad that I slept through most of that because I don't know how a normal person would sleep during that time frame. Like if you have someone coming in and poking you every hour, if you're not on sedatives, I don't know how you would sleep through that. Day 3, I had that metabolic CBC drawn again. They do that every day, and of course they do a new poke every time that they draw your blood for these things. And then starting at 9 a.m. on the 3rd day, my sugars were starting to show that I was really getting low. I was starting to get in the 60 range. I was starting to get in the 60-50 range. So at that point, they started taking serum glucose, which is stick a needle in, blood from the vein, take it down to the lab to see what my glucose is. And they did that every hour for 9 hours. Once that night, the night of the 3rd night, after 60 hours of fasting, my final draws finally were able to be taken, which means I had reached under 50. My glucose at that time was actually 48. So at that time, they took my final draws. I had the C-peptide taken, insulin taken, proinsulin, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and then a glucose check. They injected the glucagon after that. That was injected at 7:50 p.m. on day 3. And then at 8 o'clock, 8:10, and 8:20, I had blood drawn to check and see how my body was responding to the glucagon that I had been given. This was hard for me, the glucagon actually, because I was very sick. Imagine like being really low blood sugar and then someone just injecting sugar into your vein. Like, I know that's not what they did, but that's what it felt like. And just injecting sugar into your vein and watching it rise. The second that glucagon hit my bloodstream, I was just sick everywhere. I was actually sick multiple times during the fast because you're really hungry. Like, you're really hungry and your stomach is just not happy. And the thing too is when you throw up during the fast, there's nothing to throw up. You haven't eaten in 3 days. All it is just bile. Like, there's nothing in there. So it's very painful to throw up during that time. After that, they continued monitoring me for an additional night, and the next day is when I got to go home. So I had blood glucose checks continually. I think I had it like every hour until I went home. So the total for that would be, I had 42 blood glucose checks through finger stick. So my fingers were poked 42 times. I had 17 lab draws, and that is a new poke for every single lab draw. It's 17 of those. And I had 2 IVs. One was a regular IV that they were able to get, and the other one ended up having to use ultrasound guidance to get it in. So 2 IVs. So yeah, I was poked a lot, and I was pretty grumpy because obviously not really sleeping well, not eating, having low blood sugar, and the symptoms of low blood sugar that come with that. It's just not fun. It's really miserable, and that panic attack kind of topped the cake, you know, of the cake of badness that was the 72-hour fast. And it's funny, I always tell people that not eating is probably the easiest part of the fast. It definitely is, because you can deal with being hungry, but it's almost like a mental torture that they play on you when you've been poked so many times. And it's like you're trying to find a new spot that hasn't been poked yet, but after 42 times, there's no new spot. You just gotta take one for the team. But for me, it was actually worth it, because it came back that I do have a biochemical marker for an insulinoma. So my next step is going to be to get a PET scan to see if they can find the tumors. They do the 72-hour fast before they do any scans, because they don't want to go in looking for something that isn't there. They say that 80% of the population actually has some sort of tumor that is totally benign and not doing anything to you, and there's no reason that they need to take it out. 80% of the population. So if you go looking for something, you're probably gonna find it. So that's why they do this after they can prove that biochemically, yes, you are releasing too much insulin. You have too much proinsulin, your glucose is low, because then when they go in and look for the tumor, if they find one, then they know that it's actually causing a problem, and they can go ahead and take it out. So that's where I'm at now in my journey, and there's a lot of stuff I'm sure that I missed or I forgot to tell you about. I hope that I never have to do this again, because honestly, even if I was supposed to do it again, I probably wouldn't. I've done this test twice now. What I'm telling you about is just the most recent test that I've done, but I've actually done it twice, and both times were equally as horrible. But if it's something that you need to go through, don't be scared, because it's totally doable. And even though it may be a bad memory that you have, at the end of the day, your life is worth so much more. So just go through the test, do it. One day it's gonna be just that, a memory. It's gonna be a bad memory that you have, but you did it and it's over. So thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for being a part of this journey for me. I don't know what's gonna be ahead in my future. I know the next step that I'm going to be doing is getting a PET scan, and after that, there may be some kind of surgery involved, and insulinoma is very rare. So I want to share my story and maybe help others who are going through this or who might suspect that they have an insulinoma, just so that they know what they're going to be going through, and that kind of takes, knowledge is power, and it takes away some of that fear. So I hope I could do that for you guys. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!